What's up guys, Mark Bell here with another tutorial. Today we're going to be covering Bussard collectors. So I've had a few people on social media ask me how do I go about doing mine, and it's really a simple process, just editing roughness maps and refraction. So we're going to take a quick look at that using Redshift. Now we can use any physically based renderer to do this very similar technique. All you're doing is making material see-through, and then we're going to play with the roughness values. So let's first of all have a quick look at what we're trying to accomplish here. And here's a few maps that I'm going to be using later on. But if we look at the studio model of the next generation, you can see that it looks like there are two lights on the inside of this translucent cap, and there are varying levels of refraction going on. So that could be down to a couple of things. That could be down to imperfections in the material itself. There could be dust or dirt, or trapped wires in between the lights, or gels that haven't been light down properly. Any reason at all. There could be any amount of things happening here. But the point is we're going to try and create the same thing in 3D. So I'm going to try and get some more reference here. And let's have a look. That's probably a good one. It's a good one to show that there's definitely a light that's right at the base of this, and it's bleeding out just to the halfway point, but it's not quite reaching the edge of the cap. You can also see that it's got some surface imperfections here, and as the Enterprise kind of swings away from camera, it's gone from refracting right to the middle to about 3/4 of the way down that cap. So it's to do with the index of refraction, and that's definitely an interesting thing that you should probably look into. It's going to take a lot more than I have in this tutorial to cover, but here is another example, and you can see where that hot spot is, and then where it sort of bleeds out, and you can see all of those lovely imperfections and different veins and gels and stuff. It looks really, really cool. So we're going to try and recreate this thing in 3D. So switching over, I'm just going to hit the render button to show you what we're going to try and achieve, if it works. And here we go. Yeah, so this render is a little bit noisy, but it's just to give you the general idea, just proof of concept here. So you see that image that I showed you before? So you've got the light here, and you've got that bleed to the middle, and then as we rotate that cap, there isn't really that much light bleed happening towards the end of the cap here. So we're going to try and build this shader from scratch, just so you can see what's going on. Alright, so I'm going to turn off my IPR, and I'm going to assign a brand new Redshift shader. So if we just engage our IPR and see what's happening. So what we've got here is a ceramic looking coating, and that's not really going to help, is it? And as you can see, I have two lights already set up inside of this thing, and this is roughly where I think these lights are on the physical model. So we're going to make this thing see-through first of all. So let's do that. And just to keep it nice and simple, all we're really doing here is making this thing see-through, and then we're going to adjust the roughness values just to make sure that that light spreads and bleeds throughout the refraction layer of this shader. So let's make this see-through first of all by adding some width to the refraction. And when I do this, it should just look like boring old glass. Just like this. Nothing exciting about this whatsoever. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just increase these roughness values ever so slightly. So I'm going to give this 0.2. Okay, cool. Do you see what's happening here? So as I increase the roughness value, the light is just starting to spread and bleed throughout this nacelle cap. So I'm going to just increase the roughness again to 0.5. Yeah, that's more like what we want. So I'm just going to change the, let's see, what will I change? Let's control the roughness value with an image instead of using a numerical value, just so you can see what's going on. So this is why it's a good idea to start collecting roughness maps. Okay, and you can get these things from the likes of Gumroad or Turbo Squid. People like to sell packs of these things, and they're really handy to have. Things like fingerprints and dust and smudges, they just make reflections look a hell of a lot more realistic than what you can achieve with just a bog standard noise map or just a straight numerical value, just like you can see here. So let's go ahead and apply one. Now I'm gonna stick this into the reflection roughness in Redshift, but there's probably something very similar inside of Octane or V-Ray, but we're just gonna go ahead with this for the moment. Okay, I'm just gonna rotate this a little bit to see if anything starts to come through. And as you can see, it's looking pretty flat. And that's because this texture map here is mostly white, and the brighter something is in a texture map, it's going to add more roughness than a dark value. So if it's a darker looking texture map, it's going to be more transparent than something that's got a light colored texture map. So this is why up here, if you can just see my the shader that I've made earlier, I've actually dialed this down to more of a gray type color. Okay, and I'm going to just actually grab this texture map and I'm going to plug this in just to show you what it looked like before I did any tweaking. So let's plug that one in. There you go. It's actually kind of a nice example of this because it's giving you lots of different variations here in the roughness. So you've got more of a rough area here, and you've got a darker area here, which is bringing back the original transparency. So this is why if we knock this up to more of a gray color, it's going to give you more of a frosted look. So let's drop in a output node. Let's link that up. And let's engage our color map. And this will allow us just to bring up these black points a little bit. So as I do that, the IPR should update. Like that. Maybe put a little bit of a curve on it. Yeah, something like that. Alright. Now, next thing, if we study the material that I've already got here, so what I've done here is I've edited the reflection color and the refraction color, and that's really just to do with coloring the light as it passes through the shader rather than changing it to a red light. So if we do this, change it to kind of red, change that refraction color to a red or a pink. Okay, so this is kind of looking a little bit on the bright side, so I'm going to just change this refraction value to more of a darker red to see what happens. So I'm also going to edit the index of refraction here. Now the index of refraction, that's a very scientific value that every single shader and material on the planet has, okay? It's just really how light bounces and refracts off something. So for example, car paint would have a refraction value or an index of refraction of 2.2. Glass would have something like 1. If we just reduce that value, you'll be able to see how light is refracting differently. So if you pay attention to the actual light here, do you see it's not bleeding out anymore? So I'm going to change this to something like 1.75 or 1.8. Okay. It's not looking too bad. And this is cool. You can actually start to see the imperfections already here. So you see the way we have our lights right here, right where they would be on the physical model. So as we rotate around this, you can see their light emission points right here. And if we go into the darker area, the darker side of this model, you can see like a thumbprint. You can see where this light emission starts, but you can see these imperfections starting to occlude where the light's coming out, and that's what we want. Okay. So the next thing that we can look at here is the this. Okay, so we've got our refraction and transmission, and we've got our weight. Okay, so we're controlling the roughness with a texture map, but we can also control other things like the weight of refraction through a texture map as well. So I'm going to plug another map in here, and we'll give it maybe this one, just to see what it does. And we'll have a look at our IPR and see how that updates. So you see how it's changed? But what's interesting is, if we have a look at our, if I go back to this, if I go back to my reference photographs, okay, and I scroll right to this one, all right, if we really zoom in here, you can see that there are bright areas, but then there are like these darker areas. They're like veins that kind of run through this thing. And these are just very small imperfections. And that's kind of what we've got going on here. We just let that IPR update. I know it looks really noisy, but yeah, look at that. That's what we want. Now, these dark areas, these could probably be softened a little bit more if I'm being honest. So I'm going to drop in another color correction output node and just plug that up into the transmission rate and enable our IPR here, and just take some of these black levels out just by raising that black point. And you see it's just a very subtle hint of it now. Just keep raising that up. And that's looking not too bad, you know. If I just reduce some of these values. It's kind of cool. As I reduce these white values, you can see that it's getting darker. And if I raise the values, because I'm letting more light through, because I'm raising these values from gray to white, it's becoming more transparent, or not more transparent, it's letting more light out of that shader. It's allowing light to pass through that shader. So that's pretty cool. The only other thing I might want to do here is just maybe add some dispersion into that shader. Yeah, that looks kind of cool. And maybe set the absorption rate to something like 0.5. Yeah, nice one. Just edit some of these values. Let's take a look at our... Yeah, I think this maybe needs to be a little bit more red. It's currently quite pink. So let me just try and make that a little bit more red. Okay, so that is looking pretty alright actually. I just tweak these index of refractions again. Because what I want to try and keep is this brighter spot, but I also want it to bleed out into this middle bit, and then try and be darker towards the end of the cap. So let's maybe try 1.8. We can always change the diffuse color of this as well, just to get us more to where we want to be. Yeah, that looks nice. One other thing we can do, now that we've got the base material here, we can also play with the coat settings on it. Alright, and if we just switch back to our reference here, you can see that there's a very soft specular highlight right here, and I think this is probably where light is being emitted and it's just being caught here as a reflection. So we could also have another look through some reference photographs here. I don't think I have any good ones actually, but this is kind of what's happening on the inside. I also then want to put a little specular highlight on the outside, just so it's a little bit more reflective and it catches some of that round shape that we've got going on here. So I'm going to scroll down to coating. And currently the weight is set to 0. So that means we just want to apply a little bit of this, a little bit of shininess, and this should get very reflective once I add this value. Yeah. So you can see what's going on here. It's very reflective. And then if we just play with that roughness value again, if I give it to something like 0.4, this hotspot's starting to just show up. Very similar to what we had in our reference photograph. Okay? You can also add a little bit of bump to it if you really, really wanted to. You could put in like let's see, a cellular map. It just means that it gives it this orange peel type look, you know? So it means that if you're really close to that 3D model, it's going to look like something physical, you know? It's just going to look like a porous material rather than just a piece of CGI perfect shader that you've got going on here. Because in my opinion, it's the imperfections that add to the realism of stuff. So the more imperfections you add, the better, to be honest with you. And, you know, let's be realistic about this. The Bussard collector is probably going to be about this size on screen. Know what I mean? But you can just see how it catches that light, but it also shows off that light emission point from the inside of the cap. Okay, so I hope that's kind of taught you a little bit of something. Apologies if I rambled. If you do want to know anything else about this, or if something wasn't clear, please leave me a comment in the comments section, and I will try and make another video to just clarify things, and or I'll maybe try and get back to you personally. But until then, happy rendering, and thanks for watching.